Welcome back to Immersion Church. I'm Pastor Chris Solak. We're in week 11 of Hebrews. We are in the thick of it as we are talking about the Royal Priesthood. The author has taken us through what does it mean and who is our intercessor. Talked about the mature expression. We talked about sacrifice last week and how we must listen and obey to the direction of God in order to enter into this deeper, more mature place to discern and understand. And so it leaves us with these scriptures here, finishing up chapter 5, that put this focus on what does it mean to regress and to refuse. And we're going to define regression and refusal, at least from a spiritual standpoint and as to what the author is speaking to. But I don't want this to be a negative, considered to be a negative message, yet a useful one for maybe where we have blind spots, that where there might be a part of us that's refusing and understanding no one really wants to go into self-sacrifice mode. Nobody loves self-sacrifice mode. No, it's actually a love of God and a desire to do His will, to be with Him, to be a part of His movement within the earth that actually compels someone to move past self-sacrifice and to build and develop and ultimately to obey the command of God when we don't like it. I don't like being away from my family. I don't like being away from my bed. I'm going to be honest, I like American food. So when God sends us overseas, I can find something amazing about anywhere and everywhere we go because there's beauty in it. There are things that I've never seen, never experienced. But to say that all of the food is familiar and I just identify with it right away, maybe with the exception of the Philippines. The Philippines is cheating a little bit. It's so westernized. And even so many of the traditions that are there now in the Philippines are merged with an American twist or an American perspective. So in that way, it's a bit of a cheat, right? But there's still things that are just very, 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 and then there's things that you find that you love more than you love things here in the United States. Shannon and I ate tocino, and if you don't know what tocino is, you should have it. And I actually need to make it here pretty soon. It's a wonderful breakfast, Filipino breakfast, and I'm not a big breakfast guy. I'd eat breakfast every day. We were eating breakfast twice a day. We would have tocino in the breakfast, and then we were having it for like lunch and dinner on top of it. And so, incredible food. So there are things that when you step out of your box, you do find that there's a part of you that can grow with it and develop with it. And that's the whole point. It's not about your box anymore. And this idea of your expectation, your box, what you plan to have happen, all of this has to go out the wayside. And it's now about the heart of God and the desire of God, not only to use you, but to be with you. I want you to think about this, that God mentors us and then He takes us on mission, whether that mission's next door or it's halfway around the world. There are many people that are called to this Las Vegas community. Most of them have not grown up here. They've come and they've been sent from somewhere else. There are pastors that come from Europe. There are pastors that come from South Africa. There are pastors that come from South America. There are pastors that have come from Southeast Asia. They come to the United States. Pastors that come from Canada. They come and feel led to minister in the United States, to bring an outside perspective in. Why? Why would God do that? To open, to reach, to accomplish that purpose and will. Do you ever think about that as America being a place that people are actually sent to? Just as much as we're sent somewhere else, there are people that are sent from other places to America. And America, I can't even imagine how uncomfortable some of these people are coming to America, because America and the way we do things is so vastly different than the way everybody else in the world does things. With the exception of parts of Europe and Canada, we're very different. We're very different. And the way we do things is so over the top. And I've talked to people who have been sent here to do ministry, and when they're really honest, it takes them a little while to, because they're trying to be polite, but they start to go, how do you hold people's attention? That's a very good question. And that's the thing that where you could go to the Philippines and people come to church and they sit in church and they pay attention and they're active. They're pursuing. They give you their focus. Where people here may or may not do that. People here, their attention spans are very, very short. Well, that's problematic when you're trying to teach and you're trying to teach deeper things. America is not easy ground. It's actually very tough ground. We have more distractions. If you just look at our entertainment market compared to the rest of the world combined, we rival it. Seriously, I mean, you don't have pro leagues in Canada. They're part of our pro leagues here. With the exception of Canadian football. If you've ever seen Canadian football, you'd understand why we have the ultimate sports market and the Super Bowl, right? Nothing like that. Nothing like that there. And we share so much common culture. The American entertainment industry is massive. Massive. A lot of distraction here. Let's talk about regression and refusal, because those are crutches that make regression and refusal very easy. So Hebrews 5:11 through 12 says this: we have much to say about this topic, although it is difficult to explain, because you have become too dull and sluggish to understand. Well, that's a wonderful thing to say, that the author is bringing to this point. What is he saying? I have more things about this topic to say, although it is difficult to explain. What is he talking about? He's talking about the royal priesthood. And he's saying, because of where you're at, there's no value in me going any further than I already have, because you have become dull and sluggish to understand. Okay, this is where regression and refusal start to take place. Dull and sluggish. Those words, I don't think are maybe the best words for us to use, because I went and got a greater definition of dull and sluggish, but to say that you are no longer sharp and quick, right? You've lost a step. You're now sluggish and you're dull. You're not sharp. You're not continually sharpened. You're trying to, takes a lot of work to cut a deep steak, right? Eat a mature meal with a dull knife. For you should already be professors instructing others by now. But instead, you need to be taught from the beginning the basics of God's prophetic oracles. This is really important, because it doesn't say that you need to be taught the word. It doesn't say that you need to be taught anything but how God works in the Spirit. This isn't an education issue. This is an experiential issue. This is a refusal to move into the deeper places of God. This is about where you choose to position your life, the way you choose to think, the way you choose to act, and what you choose and do not choose to experience. It will create issues, but I think it's beautiful the way this does explain the basics of God's prophetic oracles! Exclamation mark. You are like children still needing milk and not yet ready to digest solid food. There's a real strong argument here that these people they've accepted who Christ is, yet they are not capable of moving in relationship to who Christ is. Because it's by the Spirit and listening and obedience that we come deeper and mature. To say that they understand the basics, yet they should be beyond that and teaching people. So this is not a lack of knowledge. I got to raise my voice on this. This is not a lack of knowledge. This is not a lack of understanding. This is a lack of experience. And it's a mindset and a heart attitude that affects this ability to go deeper with God. My first point this morning is that when we become uninterested and unexcited based on what God has done for us, we regress. Now, this has a certain level of blindness to it because sometimes we don't always grasp the magnitude of what God has done for us. Yet here's the craziest part about this is that the author is speaking to the fact that most of them should already be teaching others, which means the level of understanding is great. Can I stress this once and for all? That you cannot conceptualize God, and that the more information about God you have cannot make up for encountering God, moving with God, living in the presence of God, and existing from His direction and the evidence of His perfect will entering into the earth through your life. So quit trying to justify you're okay by not experiencing the presence of God. Well, most other people aren't doing that. They're really unhealthy groups of people who claim Christ and don't experience any of this. Because the evidence or the lack thereof speaks to the fact that is it really of Christ? Well, it says Christ in the name. I grew up going to Christ Community Church. Well, He has to be there. He's in the name. I love that church. I had a lot of fun growing up in that church. Yet, I didn't have a lot of spiritual experience in that church. They entertained me very well. In junior high, we used to do what they called an all-night riot. I would love someday to have enough kids in our ministry to be able to do one of these around Vegas. We took school buses, and not just 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we took 350 junior hires. I'm pretty sure it was like 9 or 10 or 11 buses, because then you had adult sponsors and all this kind of stuff. And we went to places from like 11 o'clock to like 4 or 5 in the morning, from like a Friday into a Saturday. And we would go to roller rinks and laser tag places and cosmic bowling. And, and before all that, we played games. We had a message and a worship service. And then we would have like a dinner, usually pizza. And then they would put a movie on while we were having like pizza and popcorn to kind of get us all calm before the storm. And then the buses would pull up and we would pile in and we'd go all night because it was an all-night riot. Great experience. So much fun. I built so much relationships that I still have with people and friends I still have on Facebook and contact. And we all have kids now and our lives have gone millions of different directions. Yet every so often somebody will like text something like all-night riot. I still get messages from people that talk about that. Or they'll send me pictures that they found from the 2 years that I was a part of that. I was 7th grade and 8th grade because it was a junior higher event. I went on both of them. And it was amazing. I remember that. You know how much God was attached to any of that? You know how much Jesus? Now, they did a worship service and they gave a message. But you know what? I don't hold any of that. What I remember the most, other than playing the games and hanging out with my friends, was driving the bus driver crazy, singing, "This is the song that will never end" from Lamb Chop Sing Along. That poor man needed. I hope they gave him a tip. These. I was entertained. I wasn't spiritually experiencing anything. And it's okay. It's okay to engage children to a certain degree, but then we have to equip. And the leaders within that ministry, they really did have a desire to equip. But they were very limited based on what the church would allow them to do. Because the church's belief at a whole wasn't to equip 11, 12, and 13-year-olds with the experiential presence of God, even though some of those leaders had a desire to do that. They had to play by the rules. I'm telling you, this is the issue. Church is not here to entertain you, and nor is it the purpose of church to entertain you. It is to bring you into a place of awareness that you can be transformed by relationship with God into a ferocious, living, loving machine for God. I tell you, you got to think about it. It's challenged me. I know that we have a little worship room, but the lack of excitement sometimes in the worship room breaks my heart. I'm excited to worship the Lord, but sometimes the energy that's brought in is everybody's half asleep. It's really? We worship for 45 minutes a week, and there's very few people that are really excited to be here and do that. I'm excited, but maybe we're excited for different reasons. I know the Lord's here, and I'm excited to worship Him with Him. But that comes from my personal experience during the week. And if you're not experiencing that, then I could see how it could be kind of dull. And if you're really tired, that you could sluggishly drag yourself in and just kind of go through the motion. Hebrews 5:13 says this, "For every spiritual infant who lives on milk is not yet pierced by the revelation of righteousness." That makes sense. It may not make sense to some of you, but it's going to make sense for some of us who are used to experiencing the presence of God. If you haven't been pierced by righteousness, then you would have no context. And even though I can't get the fullness in context of what God has done, I can't conceptualize the fullness of what He's done. I've seen Him do it. He's done it through me. He's done it through other people. But He saves people out of His righteous love for them. And that the power of righteousness, that if you haven't had accepted the fullness of what God has stamped, that if He hasn't pierced your heart with His righteousness, that you haven't experienced that, I would encourage you to fall on your face and ask Him to do it. I would say maybe take a day off of work and lay on the ground and beg God to pierce your heart in righteousness, because it will give you a fervor. It will light a celestial fire underneath your tuchus, because you'll start to all of a sudden to understand God's need for you and God's unbelievable desire for mankind to come to know Him, to enter into truth, and to experience His love. When we've been pierced by righteousness, you become aware of all those things, whether you can fully grasp them or not. There's an urgency put in you to love and to care for people. I can remember when I had my encounter going down and praying for people on the Strip. And it was really funny. We've been communicating with a lot of Pakistan pastors and other things. And one of the guys literally went 11 years into my photo roll and sent me pictures of me praying for people and was like, "Good job, Pastor." I was like, "Thanks." But it brought up some memories. God wasn't giving me so many crazy things to do. I remember asking Him, "Can we feed the homeless? Where do you want us to go feed the homeless?" And He directed me and my roommate where to go. And it led to these moments that my roommate documented. It was simply out of a passionate desire to serve God. If He had said not to go, I wouldn't have gone. And there were many times that He did say that. But I can think of these handful of times that He said to go. And we went to Las Vegas Rescue Mission several times. He told us to go there. We went and served there and did dinners there. But then we would go on the street and we would go and lay hands and pray for people, give them food, give them money, whatever we had. We didn't have a lot. But we wanted to be a blessing, and we wanted to bless those. We wanted them to know that Jesus loved them. Why? Because his love and his righteous love had pierced us, and we couldn't return. We wanted to demonstrate our love for him by going and declaring his love for them, by not taking, not preaching, by blessing, by loving, by caring, by doing what we could do, but we needed his permission in doing it, and he gave it. And I remember so many people for so many, like 2 to 3 years after, like kind of that moment, people would be like, so why are you so passionate about the homeless? And I'm like, I'm not. I'm passionate for people who God loves, which is everyone. I'm passionate to see people's lives changed like my life was changed. That they would experience the goodness of God like God's goodness has become my experience. That's my desire, is that I would continue to stay in that place with God, and that God would continue to use me to bless people, either with a word or with the laying on of hands or just a hug. Sometimes it's just about sitting on the phone and listening. Sometimes it's about going to the feet of Jesus and intercessing for people. Sometimes it's literally laying hands on and watching evil leave someone. It's all a beautiful expression of God's righteous love. And in that, his power. And what we experience when we experience God's power is intimacy. Seriously, like you can't get any closer to God in this fallen reality when his power flows through you. And we don't do it because for the power, we do it because of the evidence of the intimacy. It's my love of God and God's love for me that can allow him to care for others. This is the point of maturity. But you can't love someone unless you're open, and you cannot care for someone unless you are vulnerable. And so many of us are treating God at arm's length and putting conditions on the relationship, saying, I'll do this for you, but you have to do this for me. Or well, I'm not comfortable with that. And he says, I'll heal you of that. And we say, no, we don't trust him. We must abandon ourselves, our expectation, what we think we know, our righteous indignation out of self-gratification must leave so that God can do what he wants to do. So how do followers of Jesus mature? How do they mature if we're talking about this refusal and regression stunting development? Come back to my second point. The infant follower is not fully aware of the grace operating over them through the righteousness made available by Christ's demonstration on the cross. This goes back to Luke 9. Deny the self. Pick up Christ's cross. Embrace Christ's cross and follow him. I'm going to tell you, if you're not mature, it's because you have not embraced the cross of Christ. And here's the thing. When people don't embrace God this way, they become bored and they become frustrated with their lack of experience because there are other people experiencing it. But those people let go. Those people have let down. Those people have opened themselves and said, God, you just do whatever you want with me. That's the dangerous place. That's where the good stuff happens. When you put God at arm's length and say, this is how you're going to communicate to me. This is the only way I'm going to receive it. This is how you're going to move. These are the people I like working with. These people stink. These people are funny looking. These people, all kinds of self-oriented prejudice, self-righteous indignation. And we all have it. We've all been born with it. We were all born of a sin nature. It's all in there. Lay it at the feet of Jesus. Why? Because he called for it. Why? Because he's the only one who had the right to call for it. And here's the thing, you don't have the right to refuse him. You are in such incredible spiritual violation to refuse God at any point. It's only by the grace of God that maintains the relationship out of refusal. Go look at the Old Testament. Go look at what God did to those who refused him when they claimed him and claimed intimacy with him. Not good. Not good. So let this be the point of waking us up. So how do followers of Jesus mature? They mature by embracing him as he is. Jesus said it the best himself, that the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, searches the earth looking for those who desire to worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. Time to come close to the Savior. Time to let him speak into you the way he wants to. We heard this year was going to be a year of breakthrough and breakout. It is only through Messiah that is going to come, and it's going to come by the Holy Spirit. You can't circumvent God and his process when he's the one who established the process. There's no value in refusal. You have to let go and let him direct your life. You have to give him the fears, the insecurities, the vulnerabilities. You got to all the traumas that have been suppressed. You got to yield them to him. Your trust issue is not a trust issue with God, it's a trust issue with man. I'm going to say that again. You don't have a trust issue with God. You have a trust issue with man. It is the evidence of the conditioning of this fallen world that you will not come all in with Jesus Christ. It's actually the evidence of the old man winning and holding you back from experiencing the peace and the goodness and the full righteousness of what God desires for you. It's that there's a part of us that sometimes continually says, well, this feels realer than you, Jesus. I'm going to object to it. I'm going to submit to my senses, not to what you've already proven to me to be true. So how do we follow Jesus? How do we mature in that? Is that we must come all in. Not always with a clear understanding. No, we have to live lives of faith. And if you think you're going to have to understand everything about God in order to move into God, then you are never going to get there. I hope that's not discouraging. I hope that's just reckoning that you're going to have to take great steps of faith in order for God to be able to move in your life the way he desires to. Not because he needs you to leap off the ledge, but because the world has positioned itself in such a way that we have to actually become evidence for who God is. And that not everything is laid out and easy. Sometimes we have to cut new paths for the others behind us, just like Jesus did for us. Speaks to purpose and calling. That's not for everybody. But that if you live a life of faith, that generally you are cutting a trail for somebody somewhere. If anything else, just the evidence of the experience is enough to create a testimony that you will share at some point later on in your life. Hebrews 5:14 says this, but solid food is for the mature, whose spiritual senses perceive heavenly matters, and they have been adequately trained. This is important. What they have experienced to emerge with understanding of the differences between what is truly excellent and what is evil and harmful. Did you hear that? I stumbled through it, so I'm going to read it again. But solid food is for the mature, whose spiritual senses perceive heavenly matters. Okay, that is discernment of spirit. You can't have that outside the spirit. You can like something spiritual is happening, but to actually discern what spirits are doing what, and whether they're good or evil, which is what the closing statement is, and they have been adequately trained. Now listen, how are they trained? And have been adequately trained by what they've experienced to emerge with understanding. Do you hear that? To merge, to emerge, understanding with experience. This would be the written word of God and being the gospel. To being a hearer of the word and a doer of the word. This is what God is calling us into. With understanding of the differences between what is truly excellent and what is evil, and most importantly, harmful. My third and final point this morning is that the mature follower operates from the Holy Spirit, discerns and draws from the experiences they've had learning from their growth process. It's very strange to me, and maybe this is because of my own educational experiences, but the one thing, I went to broadcasting school before I went and got a 4-year program. So I went into a broadcast communications program at a 4-year university after being trained by professionals at the Illinois Center for Broadcasting, which is in Chicago, one of the third largest media market in the nation. And I went to a university of about 1,400 kids, a small Free Methodist university in a county of 30,000 people. My experience in some cases was greater and more valid than most of the people that taught me. I'll never forget, we were going to, I did a lot of sports broadcasting, and I had a teacher that he really thought I was too big for my britches, which, I was much smaller back then, if that's what you were thinking. He really wanted to try to chop me down to size, and it was really funny. He made sure that I sat in the passenger seat of the van that he was driving with all the other students. We were going to this. I was the only student in the program that had been nominated for professional awards and not student-based awards. There were the MAEBs and there were MABs. And so one was a professional designation and the other was a student designation. And I won a few awards. Let's just say that. I had a good night. Me and my broadcast partner, we had a good night. And on the drive back, this guy thought he was just going to cut me down. He's like, "You're a real loose cannon." And I was like, "Define that for me," because he meant it very negatively. And he's like, "If you believe to be correct, if you believe that you know how to do something, then you don't care. You just go for it." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, that's the evidence. The evidence of that thought process being correct was tonight." And his conclusion was that was wrong. It's very interesting, and I couldn't understand at the time whatever that pushback was, because I had experienced it throughout that community. That community was very small-minded. People didn't leave that community. People lived in that 30,000 person community after they got their degrees. They never left. They never did anything. I had this major media market experience. I had worked for what became Fox Sports in the market. My experience was greater than those that were actually teaching me. My experience, and it wasn't my knowledge base, it was my experience base that gave me the ability to dream for more, to the point of where, as I saw it later, it scared the living guts out of the people that were trying to manage and teach me, because they couldn't understand how I was doing some of the things that I was doing, and they weren't on a student-based level. They were on a much more mature level. But it was because I had been trained by people who really were good at what they were doing and knew what they were doing. And I had an instinct for what I was doing. I had a sense of where I was going. I was very intentional about who I saw myself to be and what I was going to do and the way I was going to do it. Far more intentional than them. Teaching in a little podunk university in the middle of nowhere. It was pretty obvious most of those people didn't have plans, and that's why they ended up where they were, was out of a lack of intentionality, because people with intentionality would blow by them, especially in a competitive field like media. And what I saw is that anger and resentment towards people, like I was another one blowing by them. And there was resentment towards that. Now I had all kinds of, my ego was massive, and I was always not the most respectful, nor kind, nor gentle, nor loving person. And I drank my own Kool-Aid on a regular basis, okay? So there were things that were not correct in my nature that needed to be dealt with, yet there was a lot of evidence that I was doing the right things. Plus, I was getting paid in the local market to do television work in sports. So I went to a class, and one of my teachers was using my Saturday morning interviews to teach the rest of the class on interviewing. And I told the guy, you better give me an A. You're using me as the example. Like, you're really going to grade me and give me like a lower grade when you're using me as the whole basis for the entire class? Every class I came into was me doing a sports interview. Terrifying. And you know how other students love that, right? Now, I come back to the fact that it was my experience with something greater. It was my experience with something greater. I had seen the show. I knew how it worked. I'm going to tell you, it works the same way with the presence of God. That when you are in communication with Him, that He sharpens you. You cannot become dull in the presence of God. And that there's a fervor and an energy and an excitement to see people transformed and changed. It's impossible for you to become sluggish. So how do you mature? You mature from letting go and entering into the presence of God and letting God do the work in you, but that you actually desire. You have to want Him to do that work in you, that you have to share in the partnership, that when He says that's got to go, you have to let go. When He says, I need you to turn left, that you turn left. When He says, yeah, I need you to go talk to that person that you really don't want to talk to, you got to do it. It's not for you, it's for Him, and it's for the other person. And here's the amazing part of it. You will transcend, you will change, and you will come closer to the heart of God. You will not remain the same unless you want to be the same. I know by the age of 32, I was very tired of who I was. And that was the moment that God interrupted my existence. Why? Because I had a desire to change. I had a desire to become who He wanted me to be. I wanted to be me. I was so tired of flailing and failing and struggling by that point, trying to do everything in my own strength. Yet His ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. But don't claim God if you don't want God. That's a very dangerous thing to do. I'll just end on this, is that this royal priesthood that He's built, there's a place for you, and there's a place for me. This new creation, there's a reason that you and I were placed in this time. We all worry about, we all are cautious of the sacrifice, but the reality is that the thing that we sacrifice is the very thing that has been harming and damaging us all our life. The fear is the fear of the unknown. The what if comes from the world, because there's no what if with God. He's faithful and He delivers. And He does it because He's righteous and He loves us. He's true and He's holy. If you're holding on, today is the day to let go. Don't waste any more time. Let go and let God do the heavy lifting for you. Yet you have to be willing to participate and be obedient to what he calls us to do and how he wants you to live out the rest of this existence. Until next week, be blessed.